Hey, BT here. We're about to go inside serious questions that every person should ask themselves in this lifetime. You're going to come out of this feeling really good about the direction of your life as long as you can quiet the mind and find the answers you seek. Come on in. Hey everyone, this is BT and welcome to Inside the Episode. Today, David and I are going inside serious questions you should ask yourself in your lifetime. And there's 10 questions we're going to run through here. And it was good. These are good questions.
I think they are, yeah.
They stumped me on a few. A few of them stumped me. Even though I feel pretty confident on the path I'm taking, there's always room for growth and opportunity. So I'm glad you brought us this series of questions. What was the inspiration? Like, where did these questions come from? Were you pulling from your catalog when you were first starting out? Is it years and years? Do you have a reference point? Like, where did this idea come from and why now?
So, you know me, I'm always going through a biography or a documentary.
And I love that about you.
And I just got done doing a deep dive on Gordon Lightfoot's.
I'm currently in that dive.
Okay. I mean, I've always loved his music. I grew up listening to his music. And I stumbled across the documentary. I think it's on iTunes. It's on iMovies or whatever. So I watched it, and I was very intrigued. There were things that I had no idea, and I started to learn. And so then that was it. It opened the door. I got to do a dive. What else is available? So I find his biographer, and I read through the book once, listened to it. I went on a trip over the weekend, so I had about like a 4-hour drive when I listened to it, and then I was staying at a resort where I had a lot of downtime, and I was listening to it, and I managed to finish it. And as I was listening to it, there were questions that were going on in my mind. I'm like, what am I taking away from this, from his biography? And the thing was that his, so he was not a megastar, right? He was very successful. Megastars have covered his work. He's one of the, like, Bob Dylan considers him like one of the best songwriters ever. And he had his ups and downs, but they really weren't that bad in comparison to a lot of other stars that were out there. But here was the thing that really kind of intrigued me. He had an opportunity to become a megastar. They could have turned him into a megastar, and he didn't want to. He knew what he was the best at, and he was fine with that. His ego did not get in that way. Yeah, he had a drinking problem. Yeah, he was a womanizer. He had those things. He corrected those things in his life. He still believes that he's making atonement for, some of those things. But what I was really impressed with was Lightfoot's focus. He had incredible focus on what he was able to do. I mean, he's such a prolific songwriter. And he did not get stuck, and they addressed this. He did not get overly intrigued by the idea of having to be bigger than he was. He just loved playing his music. So I started thinking to myself, how did he maintain that? Like, how did he know that? And if you listen to documentaries and different pieces of work around a person, you start to pick up little tidbits here and there. And what I picked up was that he must have been asking himself different questions inside of himself that caused him to come to answers that made more sense for him, right? So if you think about it, he was right on the edge. All he would have had to do was to change his style of music a little bit, and he could have been, much bigger than he was. But he also didn't want to. There was no real desire to do it. As a matter of fact, there was this one comment about how one record company wanted to move him to San Francisco and have him change the music a little bit, be not so Canadian, because he's revered in Canada. He's a big thing in Canada, and rightfully so. Like, Canada is a very proud country. And he said in the documentary, I stepped out of being Canadian just for a couple of minutes, and apparently he didn't like it. He didn't, he knew all the big pop stars, and he just did not really want to go down that road, and he still had a lot of fun. So I started thinking to myself, what would have been the questions that went on in his mind to make these decisions? And then the other thing that intrigued me was that the things that he did to help people, he had a tremendous value system of helping other individuals. People that society had turned their back on, people that had really screwed up their lives and got in trouble. And he was the kind of guy where he gave and didn't ask anything in return. He gave because he could. He would have his company send a check, like, just get this guy out of trouble, whatever he did. You have to read the biography. I'm not going to repeat the stories, but they're all in there. And I thought, in order to maintain that kind of focus, you have to ask good questions about who you are and really be solid in those answers, because life throws different things at you that, they could be major problems. They could be temptations. They could be things that feed your ego, and not necessarily in a good way, and then take you into a really, really bad place. And that didn't seem to happen for him. He maintained his art and the quality of his art through his entire career, even with his own ups and downs. And he, even with his drinking problem, because he was a pretty bad alcoholic for a good period of time, he also knew the limits of that. And he would do things to recenter himself spiritually, physically. Like if he put on weight, he would go on these 600-mile canoe trips, and he would strip the weight off and get really fit, get his head clear, no drinking, get back in the studio, do what he had to do, go on tour, and then he would party a bit. And then he would come back and straighten himself out again, and eventually he gave it up. So as I was thinking about it, and I was thinking about content for today's episode, I was thinking to myself, what is it about Lightfoot that made the difference overall? And I was thinking to myself, he had to have really solid questions, really solid answers to major questions, whether they were values or purpose or whatever in his life, to maintain that. The other thing that I found that was pretty cool was that just about everybody that talks about him as being like an amazing stand-up guy. He had a few problems, but who doesn't in life? Like, we all have something. He was a really stand-up guy. So he had to have a sense of moral compass or purpose compass, or like I know who I am. And even though I think he probably found that out over time, there is some evidence that he got that from his family. He was raised pretty strict Presbyterian in his life. He was raised in a city that's just outside of Toronto. Canada in nature is a more conservative peoples, and I think that all of that, caused him to look at life a little bit different. So then I started thinking to myself, well, what were the questions that I started to ask that at first very much challenged my life, because they weren't not the questions that I was raised with, that probably in some form or fashion are in his head. And I came up with a few, and I added a few. And I added them. So here's the questions. I don't know his. These are all mine. These aren't his questions. But they were questions that I thought that he must have a solid answer to in his life to keep it on the road that it's still on today. I mean, he's in his 80s and he's still producing. So yeah, that's where it came from.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, that's the benefit of paying attention when Steph listens to you, passes along to me, because we too watched the documentary last week and have gone down a Gordon Lightfoot rabbit hole, because to be honest with you, he was a little bit before my time. And I grew up in a household that wasn't really musical. We didn't listen to a lot of music. Steph had a different experience. She knew some of what Gordon Lightfoot was all about, but watching the documentary, I was really impressed with how he threw himself into his work. And I think I see kindred spirits. It's no coincidence that you were drawn to him, because you guys are both studiers. Like, he is an intense studier. Seeing that guy do notation, I've seen lyricists, I understand people write songs, but this guy was doing the whole thing. Yeah. He was lyricizing. He was
lead sheets,
notation,
lead sheets,
amazing and impeccable. You could see the amount of time and energy he went in. And another thing I liked about the doc was they said at times he could be difficult to work with, but he wasn't a tyrant. Like, he was a stand-up guy, and you said that, which I love, because he was a guy who would give you the shirt off his back, literally. He would pull you out of the gutter and give you a job in the club, or do whatever it would take to help you on your way. But he also demanded from his band, he demanded from himself excellence. And I think it's really cool that sort of guy exists in our lifetime and exists on the fringe for the most part. Like there's people growing up nowadays who don't even know who Lightfoot is, right? But if you go back and look at the influence he had on music and the people that covered his songs and just the lyrics, like if you strip away the music and just read the lyric, it is some of the most magnificent poetry you'll ever see in your life. It's so crazy, and I love it. And I'm only, like a third of the way through the book, because as I'm sitting there watching the documentary, I'm on Amazon downloading, or rather purchasing the book to have it shipped. I've gotten into this phase where I'm not listening to the books as much, I'm reading them. So I'm currently reading that book, and it's absolutely outstanding. But let's get back to the question. So I love that you created these, and I kind of want to go through each one and just talk a little bit about, why it's important to answer this, how difficult it will be, because I think the one thing that you said in the episode was you got to really think about these. You can't just go with your first answer. I think that's one thing that I've learned in actually the therapy that I'm a part of. It tells you not to believe the first answer to the question. You got to dig a little deeper. And I love that you said that. And why is that? Like, why do we not take our first answer the first time and put a little bit more thought into it?
Well, generally, because if you don't know yourself, the first answer is going to be based on what you currently believe or the reality that you're experiencing. When I don't think these are the exact questions that I came across when I first started, but there were questions that were similar to this that I heard, and I don't remember where I heard them. It was one of the cassette tapes that I had been listening to at the time. And when I didn't have answers to a lot of them, like the first one, what's the most important thing to me and why? I couldn't answer that question. I mean, it was, the most important thing is my family. I got to go to work every day. Like what else is important besides that? I was also raised with the idea that family is the most important thing. But I had a feeling that by the person who would be asking that question, that there's a possibility of another answer there. I mean, if you already know that your family is the most important thing, but you're miserable or things aren't working, there's something wrong in the way you're asking the question or what you consider the answer to be. So if we, and then like I even mentioned in the podcast, there was something that I picked up from Tony Robbins years ago, and he was like, the quality of your questions is the quality of your life. If you want a better life, ask better questions, right? And I didn't understand that at the time, but it's really true. If you keep asking the same dumb question, your mind's going to give you the feedback that it only knows. It doesn't have any resource to pull from. So if you ask the question, you don't like the answer, now it's time to find out, how do we get to a different answer? It's not just accept the answer that's there. There's something else going on, because these are answers that will move your life forward. These are questions that will move your life forward if you really search for a deeper answer inside of yourself. And I do believe with every question that I gave, I really kind of went through this, that there is a deeper answer for every single person that they can pull out without having to go somewhere else to get it.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. First question, what is the most important thing to me in my life and why? Second question, what am I willing to sacrifice for what is important to me? I think sacrifice sometimes gets a negative connotation. Anytime we make a decision, you said we sacrifice something else. It's the truth. It's when you make a decision, something else gets dropped. There's nothing gained in life without the sacrifice of something else. I mean, you said a ton of things in the episode, sacrificing something of a lower nature for that of a higher nature. And you said for you, it meant engaging in a 7-year sacrifice, 7 years of study that led you to doing tremendous amounts of work on yourself and through all the reading and whatnot. You said you even sacrificed like music.
I did.
A lot of television, like all these sorts of
television,
things.
Movies, music.
And the reason behind that being what? Just completely stilling your mind? Or what was that?
So if you go back to my story in the beginning, the problem was I needed an education, but I was working 6.5 days a week and I didn't have the time or the money to get an education. So I break out of that a little bit. However, I'm still working a tremendous amount. So now it's like I need to find a way to educate myself somewhat in order to be able to move my life forward, because I knew that I made this move, but I was not going to continue because I was still driving a truck, you see. I was just making 3 times the amount of money that I was at a different company. So while it was a great break, it was the same skill set. Now I needed to educate my mind so that I can become more valuable to an employer. And I also realized one of my greatest realizations was that my change of attitude is what gave me that break. So it was kind of like, I need to find out as much about myself first, right? And then expand upon that. So I had limited time. But I looked at, okay, if I'm going to do this, where is my time? Where is the time for me to be able to do this? I had a 100-mile drive to work every day. So that's 200 miles round trip. That's a tremendous amount of time in the car. I could either be listening to the Rolling Stones and Led Zeppelin or whatever I would be listening to because that was my music, or I could shut that off and be like, I'm just going to put this away for a while. I need to figure me out first, and then I can come back to all that stuff. So yeah, I gave up music. I gave up fishing. I gave up going to movies. I gave up almost every recreational thing that I did just for myself, and only kept the things that were important to my family and my work, and that every minute of every day. And then it was Walkman, like a cassette tape. It wasn't like an iPhone, right? But I carried it with me, and that's been my study practice ever since.
Well, it's full immersion, right? You fully immerse yourself. It's just like when you want to learn to speak another language, go to the place and immerse yourself in it. And then over time, you'll get it. Same is true. You got 3-4 hours in the car every day. That's a lot of valuable time that you could be doing something else, but you're listening to these tapes, you're taking it all in, and probably to the point where you hear it in your sleep as well. So there's a subconscious programming that's going on long after you're out of the car,
yeah,
I'm sure.
And in the Lightfoot documentary, you see that that's what he does with his life. When he would write, he would go away by himself, lock himself in a room, a hotel room, a cottage, whatever, and he would stay there for a month, and he's just writing music, like all out. When he's going to get healthy, it's immersion. Like he goes, it's not something like little. He goes on a 600-mile canoe trip. Like he takes himself out of the exposure to alcohol and really gets himself fit and healthy. And so there's a bit of an extremist thing there, which is also part of my personality. So, but also the immersion thing works for me. I think because that's how I conditioned myself to do it. And I saw that parallel, like you had mentioned before. And I thought, what are the questions in this guy's mind? So that's, I just wanted to reiterate that.
Totally. Coming from someone like yourself who's a seeker, but also a person who didn't like to study, you really conditioned your mind to get to that place over time.
It's one of the biggest mysteries of my life, man.
Right.
Go from a place of like fucking hating, to pick up a goddamn book to I can't put them down. Like my library, I just go pour through books and that information like water.
Like 2 weeks ago, Gordon Lightfoot wasn't even a conversation we would have had, and now we're having a conversation about him because you saw something, read something, went down a dive, and here we are. I love that. I think that's why your material is so timeless, because stories are going to go on forever. Stories will come out. A new person will come into your awareness next week, and we'll all be the benefit of that.
It already has. I'm not going to tell you what it is yet because I'm in the middle of it, but I'm already in the middle of another dive.
Okay, perfect. See, you went from one to the next, and we're going to benefit from that, so I love it. All right, the third question you asked, what purpose would I consciously trade my life for? I love that you said you're going to be spending a lot of time doing this. So you definitely, whatever your purpose is, you really want to make sure, because you're trading a lot of time, you're trading your life for this thing. For you, you kind of, I don't want to say stumbled into your purpose, but you kind of knew you wanted to make a big impact. When you talk about trading your life for something, when did that register with you that, okay, this is something I could do for the rest of my life and not even consider it work? Was that early on, or is it something you grow into? Or?
No, it was not early on. It came, it's a good question. When did that show up? When I was studying, I did not know that this is what I was going to end up doing. I was studying because I needed answers. I just needed answers. I needed answers like I needed to breathe. What I didn't realize at any time during that study was that this was my purpose. I was studying to get answers, but I was also studying because that was a thing I was naturally attracted to. It was the thing that I was naturally gifted at. It was the thing that I naturally wanted to do without anybody telling me to do it. It was all the pieces fell into place. Like a guitarist, they'll pick up a guitar and they do it for 15 hours a day because they love it. It's not work, where somebody else will be like, I can't get myself to fucking practice the goddamn guitar. As much as I want to be like Jimi Hendrix, I can't get myself to practice a guitar. And I was like that with almost everything in my life, except for this. This information, this knowledge was like a love relationship, So then when I started to, this is hysterical actually. Like, how do you not make this connection? It had to be a couple of years prior to me starting the company that I actually started looking at businesses. I knew that I wanted the freedom, that I had some entrepreneurial spirit, and I wanted to do that, and I couldn't find the right thing. And it was through a suggestion from my mentor that it was kind of like, I guess that is it, isn't it, right? Part of it was that all of the study and everything seemed so easy, and it meant a lot to me, but I really wasn't thinking about how much it would have meant to somebody else. That part wasn't crossing over. I was very selfish in my study. Like, it was all, I was just trying to figure me out. Yeah. So I hadn't realized yet how beneficial, nor did I realize that I actually had a gift for speaking and being on stage and coaching and, coming up with creative ideas for a business. Like, I didn't know that I had that yet. So it took that bit of a challenge from my mentor to get me to step into that side of myself and then really see what I was capable of doing.
Yeah, I mean, it was your oxygen. It's so amazing to me. It's like breathing. You can't get enough of it. And to this day, you've maintained that for the decades you've been in business. You maintain that quest and thirst for knowledge and the deep dives you do. I mean, it really rounds you out as an individual because you're still working to perfect you, even though we know the perfection is unattainable. You are always striving. And I think that leads to the fourth question. What do I really love? I mean, it was clear to you after you got that nudge from your mentor that, this is what I love to do. And I can actually make a really good living helping others do what I did. And I think, what do I really love is an amazing question, because you talked about, security, safety, and certainty become our value system. And a lot of times we default to the safety of things, and we're going to go become this thing because maybe our parents told us we should become this thing, or our friends told us we should become this thing. And then there's those other people that go the other direction and really contemplate, what is it that I love to do and how can I get paid to do it?
Yep.
I think that's important.
There's a I don't remember if this was in the documentary or if it was in the biography. But somebody's talking, and they said about Lightfoot that what he really loves is being on stage playing his music. And there's no difference between him there and him in his normal life. You have the same person across the board, that he's not playing a character up there, where they then reference Dylan, and they were like, Dylan was a character. He was a created character for that specific purpose, but it's not who he really is as a human being. So it was fascinating that they did that cross reference there, because I totally got that. Like, I've been a Dylan fan forever, but most people know today that what Dylan created was a character. Bob Dylan is a character. It's not even his real name. I mean, his name is Robert Zimmerman. This guy's from Minnesota. But he created that character back in 1961. But with Lightfoot, that's who he was, head to toe, inside and out, to his core. That's the person that he was.
Yeah, that's amazing. For those of you, who want to go out and watch this doc, it's called If You Could Read My Mind. Definitely watch that. I loved it. Not knowing much about the history of this man, the humble Canadian that he was incredible, and he was just pure. When I was listening to him sing, it just pure. It almost brings you to tears, actually, when you're watching it and reading the book. The book is just called Lightfoot, and it's an amazing read as well. Nicholas Jennings, I believe, is the author. You're going to love that as well. But just fascinating to see. What do I really love? The security and safety piece. Number 5, the question you asked: what excites me? Oftentimes there's some facets of guilt that might come along. You even said it in the pod about, we don't want to get too excited about a certain thing, whether it's, we feel guilty because we're outgrowing people. I think I went through this a little bit myself. I was excited to go on this journey, but I also knew that I was leaving some people behind along the way, and that there's some tough decisions that need to be made, because I fought a lot with, I was better than someone. I think I still deal with that a little bit to this day. But when I first came into this, it excited me like none other. It was like somebody turned the lights on. After being a teacher and being so structured in what your day looked like, to being able to, help other people and be in your purpose, thought it was absolutely incredible. So what excited you early on in this? Was it the messages you were getting? Was it the people you were meeting? Was it the mentor you had? What was the excitement for you, and how do you quantify that?
The initial excitement was that I was watching my life change right before my eyes. And it was changing so fast and so dramatically that it was blowing my mind every day. Like every day back then was like waking up at Christmas. It was like, what is going to change today? What is going to change today? And it was never anything bad. It was all great stuff. And I kept thinking to myself, this is incredible. How did I miss this for so long? And now it seems to be coming so easy, like without any effort. It's just showing up. It then changed to, I could help other people do this, right? At first I thought I could help everybody. But then as I matured into that, I realized I could only help the people that really wanted to change. And now that's what excites me. Really being able to show someone who really wants to change how much fun and how great it can actually be and how easy it can actually be once you get past your own head.
Yeah, when you loosen up a little bit and let it come, because it will come. It's like drinking from a fire hose, like literally. I mean, you don't have to siphon anything. It just comes at you, and it's effortless. I mean, and some people might say, well, that's not been my experience. Well, why are you getting in your own way? Right. I would challenge them with that. All right, a few more here and we'll wind it down. Am I having fun in my life? I think this is straightforward and simple. I mean, if you're not having fun doing something, then why are you doing it?
Exactly.
I mean, that's the whole point.
Exactly.
I mean, it's not
Exactly.
too much expansion needs to take place there.
And I'll tell you, I've had a hard time with that one.
Really?
Yeah. There were so many people, loved ones in my life that had a real issue with me changing, that there was part of me that didn't want to show that I was having a good time around them.
So you're bringing yourself down to that level.
Yeah, because it wasn't even so much that they were having a hard time with it. They were giving me a hard time for having a hard time with it. Almost like, you're doing this to me. So for a long time, there were certain people that I would be around and it would be like, I need to dumb it down because, it's actually more painful to have a good time than it is to almost kind of faux act like, it's hard and there's this and, that type of thing. So that was something I had to I had to play with that for a while.
Yeah. Wow. Well, that's great. Thanks for sharing that. I would not have expected that, but it makes total sense. It's resonating with me. I think I do the same thing at times too. I think many people who have reached a level of success, again, leaving people behind, you oftentimes will bring yourself down to their level to ease their pain instead of just owning who you are as a person. Right. Interesting. I almost skipped over this next question, but I better just use it anyways, because I do not do well at this. Is asking for help a value for me? I do not like asking for help. And the thing that popped into my head was men and asking for directions. I don't know if we're hardwired to not ask for help as a male, being the provider, all this like masculinity piece. But when I was thinking about, is asking help of value, I would rather do it myself than maybe burden others with it. Does that make sense?
It makes sense.
Yeah.
It makes sense.
Yeah, it's totally my MO.
It's something that's ingrained in us, the thing about the asking directions, you're supposed to know where you're going, right? It's like, what are you if you don't know where you're going type of thing. There's a lot of challenges with it, but it's also the fundamental thing. If you can, and it's not that you have to ask for help all the time. You don't have to be needy, but you have to have the ability to ask for help and know when to ask.
Yeah, and I noticed myself doing this, not as much now, but I used to just agree with people all the time. Like they would say, oh yeah, I was driving over there on I-4. Do you know where Cumberland Gap is? And I'd be like, oh yeah. I don't know where the hell that is, but yet I would agree with them. And I caught myself doing it. And I said to myself, why do I do that? Because I want people to be like, bring me in. I want them to feel a part of me. I want them to not judge me. So I would just blindly agree with them. I've gotten to a place now where I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Like, can you explain that a little bit better? So I don't know if that has to do with help, but at least it's recognizing a little bit in myself that you don't have to blindly agree with someone. If you need clarification.
And you don't have to know everything either.
No, you don't. Ask for it. Number 7 was a challenge. That's a challenge for me. Do I believe I can change? If not, why not? If people don't want to change, then they're not going to. And if other people aren't going to change the way you're changing, then maybe that's not your people. Hate to say it. Number 9, how much money would I really like to earn and why? Is that a specific number? Like, do we have to get really clear on the number? Or is it like, I don't think you can just say, I want to be wealthy. Like, you have to kind of, again, quantify how much that is.
Mean, even if you start off with that, I think I started off with that. I started off with, I wanted to be wealthy, but I had no idea what the money was for. It probably, if I dig back to that time, it probably had to do with not having to worry about money again, to be able to spend whatever you want and never have to worry about it, which is a complete fantasy. Like, that doesn't exist. But I think that as you mature into that question, what it does come down to is it gets you to look at, like, well, what's the money for to begin with? Okay, if I want to live my life this way, what does that look like? Now, what does it cost to live that way? Which then leads to a more specific number in the answer. But it's like I'm just trying to crack the question open with people here, because that's what kind of happened with me. I was listening to these tapes and stuff, and I would listen to these different speakers and authors ask these questions or talk about a question that changed their life or whatever, and I would ask myself the question, and so many times either I had a very reactionary answer or no answer at all. Like, I have no clue. I remember somebody, what do you want? I don't want anything. I'm fine. I don't need anything. I'm fine. Don't go there. I don't need anything. And that's really where I was. It took a long time of keep asking myself, what do I want? What do I want? What do I want? What do I want? And opening that door and allowing myself to want something again, to come back to it, which then led to, what did I need the money for, right?
Yeah, I think that question in itself, just what do I want? Like that question alone, you can spend hours poring over that, because Steph will ask me all the time, what is it that you want? And I struggle mightily just answering that question, because I feel like there's so much that I want, yet I don't always feel worthy to ask the question. So I think just in asking it is a big step in the right direction for sure.
It is.
I love that. And then last but not least, do I have a dream? I mean, do I have a dream? What is it that I want to accomplish in this life? If a person goes through this list of questions and really quiets their mind and takes the time to answer them, I on the other side of that is just pure brilliance.
Yeah, it is. And it also, again, it also is it kind of teasing out, if I don't have a dream, why don't I have a dream? How come other people can have a dream, but I don't have a dream? Where is my dream? Where'd it go? What happened to it? Did I ever have one? A person has to start to go down that road with themselves before they find it. It's there. It's there. Chances are, what happens with most people is that they get exposed to what that dream would be at some point in their life, even if it's just for a brief moment, and something slams the door shut. And then they don't open it again because it's painful to open it. And then you get a distance from it, and you start to forget what the thing even was, or you're like, nah, that was ridiculous. That's juvenile. I have to, not responsible. I have to be responsible. But the truth is, if they dig into that dream, it will mature, it'll come to the surface, and then they will find that they're starting to be led toward the things that will manifest that dream.
Yeah, and it's never too late.
It's never too late.
Never too late. I mean,
unless you're in the pine box, man, it's never too late.
That's true. I mean, we've got a lot of older men and women who come to your conferences who are making huge changes in their life in their 70s and 80s. And in this whole like retirement thing we've talked about on the podcast, a lot of people want to say, well, I just want to get to 58 or 62 or whatever. These people are changing their lives in their 80s. Yes. I mean, it's never too late to start, and you can start today. Oh, well, these 10 questions, I'd listen to this. I'd transcribe it if I were you. I would write these questions down. I would put them in a prominent place on your desk, and I would ask them and answer them to the best of your ability, and don't go with that first answer. These are really great, David.
Thanks, man.
All right. Thanks for coming inside.
You bet.
Hey everyone, that's a wrap for this Inside. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. I always learn someone or something new when David starts talking. Gordon Lightfoot, didn't even know who the dude was until we had this conversation, so this is really solid stuff. Give us a like, subscribe, and we'll see you on the next Successful Mind podcast. Later.